You're listening to Witch Wednesdays, your weekly podcast source for all things witchcraft in the modern world. Welcome back to Witch Wednesdays. I'm Steph, and I have a guest here with me today to chat about her upcoming work. But I'm going to go ahead first and let her introduce herself and let you know where you can find her and her works online.
Well, hi, I'm Deborah Lipp, and I'm the author of 11 books, believe it or not.
11!
Most 11, right? And you can find me. My website is deborahlipp.com. You can find me on Instagram or on Twitter at DebLippAuthor. There's 2 P's in Lip. I'm on Amazon, I'm on Bookshop, I'm on Facebook, I'm everywhere. You can't avoid me.
11 books. How long have you been writing?
I exactly 20 years. As a matter of fact, my first book was released in 2003.
Wow. Oh my gosh. That's an incredible amount of work. I'm very impressed. I mean, I knew there were a lot, but I did not know there were 11.
Thank you. I mean, sometimes I'm impressed. Sometimes I'm like, what is this? What have I done?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's really exciting. So I want to talk about we are going to focus on one book, but I do want to sort of talk about everything that you have going on because this is kind of a busy year for you.
It really is. So I have 2 new books just out. Bending the Binary was released at the beginning of February. Bending the Binary, the subtitle of which is Polarity Magic in a Non-Binary World. And so if you're Wiccan, or if you're in a lodge system, or if you're in half of the occult, really, you've been told that polarity is this very significant thing, and we live in a world in which enforcing gender norms is no longer acceptable. And so Bending the Binary is a book that kind of threads the needle, that says polarity magic is not a cis-het normative thing, that you have to toe that kind of line in order to work with this very powerful energy. The other book that I have that is brand new is The Way of Four, which is coming out just at the end of this month with Crossed Crow. And that is a completely revised new edition of a book that I wrote in 2004. And The Way of Four is all about working with the 4 elements in every aspect of life. I'm a little obsessed with the 4 elements.
And I am so excited to talk about that. First of all, because so am I. But second of all, how nice it must be to go back and revise your work, because I think about that all the time, even from podcast episodes from 2020. I'm like, I need to fix it. I need to redo it because things have changed. My feelings have changed. So how nice that you can go back and rework that.
It's both nice and kind of harrowing. So the next project, no, really, I may never do it again. The next project is going to be The Magic of the Elements, which is a revision of a book I wrote in 2006 called The Way of Four Spellbook. And it's just a reconceptualization. The book was never really a spell book. It was a misnomer. That was my fault. Stupid title was my idea. But that's also a revision coming out with Cross Crow, I think. I don't know what the timing is. I think about 6 weeks from now. And then at the end of the year will be the 20th anniversary edition of my first book, Elements of Ritual.
Wow.
So, right, 20th anniversary. It's that, like, that'll make you look in the mirror. But after revising 3 books this year, what I feel like is let the things that you planted in the ground stay in the ground and move on and create new things, because I am very proud of all 3 of those books, and I am very glad to be talking about them and to be revising them and to be bringing them forward. But it's also like part of me sort of feels like, well, if I was writing it today, I'd write a completely different book. I wouldn't just revise this one. And that's hard to figure out what the balance is on creating something that is modern and is up to date and is appropriate for today, but also honoring a book that was quite popular.
Yeah, it's
It's tricky.
it's definitely hard, but I think we're all familiar with that because we grow. It's kind of the point of witchcraft is you grow and change so much and you learn so much. And just the way that you
Absolutely.
interact with that information changes remarkably from year to year.
Yeah. I look at things and I think, oh, I don't know if I would have ever written that if I sat down to do it today. But the fun thing about The Way of Four is that nobody was writing books about the elements then. It really was the first book that was just a modern neo-pagan here occult four elements.
uh,
There's bunches of them.
no, I agree with that completely. So let's go ahead and date myself here. I read your book when it came out, relatively early on in my witchcraft journey, but when I was in college. So I am familiar with that work, but that is true that there were really no books about that at that time.
Yeah, it was a really new idea. My daughter says that the thing that I'm really good at is finding a hole in what is available to people and filling that hole. Like, what do you need to know as a witch that you can't easily find out? And speaking directly to that. And at the time, really, one of those things was the four elements. And I think there's been wonderful writing about the four elements since. But I'm especially proud of having kind of stepped into that void.
So, for anyone who did not read it and is looking to check out this new updated information, what can they expect from this book?
Sure, that's a great question. So the Way of Four is the four elements in magic, in life, in nature, in your body, in your home, at your job, in your romance. I really decided to look at every part of being a human being. And I started from the assumption that the four elements just touch all parts of life. And so, how could we view that? What is, um, what are some meditations that you can do on the elements? How do you balance yourself in the elements? What are ritual expressions of the elements? All of that stuff, which I think you would expect, right? I think if you went into the occult section of your local bookstore, if such a thing still exists, and you saw a book on the four elements, you would definitely not be surprised to find that there are nature exercises and that there are meditations and so on. But I also like to ground my magic in reality. So there are four different dates that you can go on, one for each element. And there are ways of bringing elemental energy into the job. And there are elemental perfumes. There's just all sorts of elemental home decor. Just whatever you have in your life, it can be influenced by the elements. And you can attune it to the elements in order to balance it. So, like, you work in an office and nobody has any fresh ideas, sounds like you need some air. How do you bring air into the office? And everything, comes from this approach, because I really believe that the elements are the building block of so many different things in Western occultism. You don't have astrology without the elements. You don't have Kabbalah without the elements. You don't have alchemy or Hermeticism or witchcraft. You don't have any of these things without four elements. So let's just assume they're everywhere. And what do you get out of that?
Yeah, and I love elemental magic and working with the elements, and I think it's something that's very tangible that even beginners can innately understand because they're everywhere. And the magic and the energies that they're associated with are very intuitive. Like we kind of already know without having to look it up.
Yeah, one of my favorite things is talking about all the metaphors that we use in our language, that are elemental metaphors. Somebody is a stick in the mud. Somebody is a wet blanket. Somebody is an airhead. People say these things all the time. And if you look at what those phrases mean, they mean exactly what an occultist means when they talk about those particular elements.
That's very true. I've never thought about that, but that is so accurate.
Yeah, because they really do permeate our understanding of life and of magic. And one of the things, sort of as an aside, is that I found out is that people who were working to balance themselves were sometimes unhappy with their own internal elemental balance. Like, I have too much anger, I'm too much of a hothead, so that's a lot of fire. That people would try to do magical work to remove or decrease that element in themselves. And that's not healthy work. What you really want to do is bring up the other elements.
Yes, that's a good point. And I agree with that. I think I'm heavy water. And I always have to remember to bring the other ones in, especially air. I struggle with that one.
Yeah, so like, one of the things that I recommend is like, yeah, sometimes I struggle with air. Sometimes I get bogged down in air. Like when I'm thinking about a problem and I'm trying to be a thoughtful, intelligent person, I overthink it because I don't have a natural relationship with air. So I think in circles. And some of the things that you can do are just really, really simple physical things, like make sure the air out your home, like open the windows, let the breeze in, have some relationship with actual physical air.
Yeah, that's something that I need to do, prioritize in my own house. It's tough when I am in such a cold weather area, but I'm looking forward to spring is starting and I can finally open some windows, because air is one of those that's, it's not as easy to see as the other three, even though it's there, it's always there.
It's always there.
But
Yeah,
it's
I
sometimes
mean,
easier to ignore.
oh, I hate the cold weather. I mean, I live in the Northeast. I don't live in a particularly cold place, but um, and no place has got normal weather anymore anyway.
True.
But like, if even a little bit warm out, we'll open the windows in the back of the apartment and then just go to the other side of the apartment till we can stay, till we can stand it, just to get. But the things that air does, like it removes the stuffiness, right? It brings in freshness. Those physical things that air does are also the things that we tend to want in ourselves when we don't have new ideas, when we're illogical, right? It's a lot of times when we're not thinking logically, when we're thinking emotionally, it's because we're stuck. Well, I'm very earthy, so for me, it's when I'm stuck. Like, I just want things to be the way they are. That's my earth, right? So I don't to bring in air is to bring in movement, which is another thing that is helpful. But again, I have all sorts of ideas. Like, you can just wear light blue every day for a week to try to bring it onto your body.
Yeah, I would say that your book has a lot of great ideas that are geared towards, simple everyday living, and not trying to, overcomplicate it and have these huge elaborate rituals. It really is what you can do in your daily life.
Listen, I grew up in the suburbs of New Jersey, and a lot of these books were always like, go out into the woods and be one with the trees. And I got like 4 trees in my town, and you know you can travel, you can do that, but I also want to make magic and witchcraft accessible to people where they are.
Which I
You know,
appreciate that, because I'm in Chicago, so I am in the city. So my access to nature is limited as well. I understand you completely.
Right. And I live in an apartment now, and it's not that you shouldn't go out into nature. Of course you should, and when you can, that's wonderful, and that's a part of life. I mean, forget about witchcraft. If you don't see trees for a while, you start to, you know, get a little gray in your mind. Every once in a while, you have to leave the city, much as everything seems like it is in the city. Um, but again, there's time, there's money, there's access. Not everything is available to everybody, and I do want to meet people where they are. And I try also to balance. You should make an effort at your witchcraft. It shouldn't just be the easiest possible thing and like no bother at all. You should be working at it, but it should be accessible to everyone.
I agree with that. It should be something that you enjoy. It shouldn't be so much work and effort that it's not, fun anymore. It should be a part of you.
Yeah, I mean, fun is so important. Fun is so important. Playfulness um is it keeps ritual alive. But like I have definitely met people who, like, if they don't have the particular ingredient of a spell around the house, then clearly they can use whatever they have around the house. And that not everything is the same as everything else, you know. Sometimes you have to make an effort.
I can appreciate that as well. And I do enjoy making, some efforts, but I also enjoy some of they still require effort, but like some of the ideas, like for the workplace that you have, for example, like they're like very indoor office type things that you can do. And
Oh yeah.
like less effort, which I appreciate because like I can't go out into the middle of nature in the middle of my workday with like all of my coworkers
Right.
counting on me and I'm like sitting in an office. Like I need stuff that I can do there that's like easier. So I appreciate those ideas that you have in there.
Nor are your coworkers necessarily comfortable with that kind of, with like really witchy behavior. Although I did, in fact, do a whole like banishing in an office once, like really early in the morning, but some other
You
people also
really?
came in. This is a true story. So I worked in this office, and there was this guy who was a screamer, and he was very unpleasant and very negative, and he screamed very, very loud a lot. And he quit. And my friend inherited his office, and she was, moving from a cube into a nice office with a door, and that was wonderful, except it was full of his negativity. And she took me aside and she said, "What can we do?" So I said, "Well, we kind of have to get into work early because people are gonna, I'm bringing a knife." you know so we were not completely unseen, right? We got into work early, but we were not the only people at work early, but they weren't paying a lot of attention to us. But we did do like a nice banishing, using myethami and some banishing pentagrams and some salt water, and um, going around the office and pinpointing all of the open spaces where energy comes in and out, and banishing each spot. And she said it made a really big difference for her.
I love that. That's such a good idea.
And I mean, this guy was toxic. This guy was, this was not just some pleasant thing that you do because you're a witch and you always consecrate things. Oh no, this was necessary.
No, that's a great idea. And never, had anybody like that bad that I had to work with, but that would absolutely make sense if I did. Keep that in my back pocket. Hopefully it never comes up.
Yeah, I hope not. Yeah. I mean, and I've worked in offices my whole life, so a lot of the work stuff in the book is definitely oriented around offices. But I did try to say, to be inclusive, to think about other work situations and work environments and stuff. I'm sure somebody will look at it and go, well, none of this applies to me. But that's okay, because hopefully one of the things when you read any book is that it sparks your own creativity. that you can
Oh,
look at it and go, well, this idea doesn't work for my job, but I see what she's getting at, and the way that I could rewrite this for myself is like, that is part of what I'm doing when I write any of my books is I I want you to run with it. I want you, the reader, to take what I've written and run with it. So whether it's a book about the four elements, or it's a book about magic, or it's a book about polarity, take what I've written and run with it.
and speaking of, I am currently working through, I'm not done, but I'm currently working through, you have like the quizzes in your book. And I love interactive books and I love quizzes, but listeners, if you pick this up, there are these sections of tallying up sort of your scores of, seeing not just like in yourself, which elements, like how much of it you have, but like there's also like a household section. I really like that one of tallying up sort of how many like elemental like pieces are in your home and where like ideas for like adding more. I love it. I'm like working through all of them. I love a good interactive book because I can really make it my own.
Oh my God, when I wrote that book, people see, people used to read magazines. And I realized that people don't read a lot of magazines anymore, but people used to read magazines, and you would buy a magazine and you would flip to the back because there were always quizzes. And it's sort of like BuzzFeed now, right? Like what character from Firefly are you? You know, or what Avenger are you, or what Hogwarts house are you, and all of those things. Like, people love quizzes, and I thought, well, this will be fun. And they're remarkably difficult to write because they're remarkably difficult to balance. Like when I was talking about, if you ask people what they want, and one of the options in life, and one of the options is love, which is the watery option, it's very hard to weight the other three options heavy enough so that anybody will want anything but love. So I had to just sort of, like, I would give the test to everybody I knew, and people at my office, and people at home, and my friends and my coven, everybody had to take tests all the time. And then if everybody came out watery, I would be like, oh, let's fix that. And those tests went to a lot of free. I feel like those tests were um, almost scientific in how hard I worked to get them correct.
I like them. I think that's like the most like fun part for me. You're right. It is like taking BuzzFeed quizzes. If you had like the style section of like being able to dress like the elements, and there's like a quiz of like figuring out who's wearing what element. I was like, I feel like a kid. This is so fun.
It was meant to be fun. It was absolutely meant to be fun. I just really, who doesn't love taking a quiz? Come on.
No, I love it. It was such a good time, like filling out all the numbers. I'm like looking around in my house of like, because there's certain things that you associate with the elements, like for air, for example, like books. Okay, like I get that, but then like what else could I do? And your lists and quizzes have like sparked so many ideas of like, how can I balance these elements like in my room, in my house? How can I add like more water to rooms that aren't the bathroom? So there's like so much interesting information to like make it my own, and I love that it's in quiz format. That just makes me so happy.
I am so glad to have made you happy. No, I mean, I know I want the book to be fun. I want the people to enjoy it. I want people to feel entertained by it. Witchcraft isn't always the most serious thing.
It's not, and I think that's a fun way to approach it because the elements are associated so much with different types of energy, and you might want to express that in your room, but also in your clothing. And I've talked about color correspondences before, and wearing certain colors that are associated with water, but you have like different fabrics and different jewelry and things. That's just like a fun way to incorporate those energies into your day, where other people who aren't witches don't even know that you're doing that, or that you're doing it on purpose.
Exactly.
But that you're doing
Exactly.
it.
Well, that all these people that, like, you can tell they're a witch from about 50 yards away. Like, they
Yeah.
are wearing all of that jewelry, and they smell like patchouli, and it's They think they're a Stevie Nicks video. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but not all of us want to live that way, and not all of us express ourselves that way. And that doesn't mean we can't um, incorporate magic into our personal style.
And I enjoy that. I get a bad rap being a Scorpio that like all I want to wear is black and look like a traditional witch. And that personality wise and clothing wise, that's so not me. So I really like the idea of, you know, I can incorporate these things and still be witchy, but not look exactly like that.
Yeah, my favorite quote on that is from Phyllis Curott, who said, I don't wear black because I'm a witch. I wear black because I'm a New Yorker.
That's I haven't heard that one. That's a good one.
Cracks me up every time I hear her say it. It's so true.
Well, do you have anything, maybe particularly out of the book or anything in general, regarding these elements that you do regularly in your own practice? I mean, I know this year is incredibly busy for you, so there's probably nothing that you do regularly, but are there any sort of spells or rituals that you like to incorporate on a semi-regular basis?
Well, what I do regularly is when I'm doing really any magic, I try to balance it. So, like before I do any spell, whenever I do a spell, I always sprinkle incense. There's always salt water, there's always incense, so that and not everybody uses incense for two elements. So I should explain that some people use incense for air and a candle for fire, but other people, and what I do is the unlit incense is the air, and then you put it on the charcoal or you light the stick, and that's the fire, so that the smoke is the combination of fire and air. And I like that very much because it balances with salt water, which is salt for earth and water. So I like the fact that the two things create four elements. If you throw in a candle now, it's three things creating four elements. And I don't like that as much aesthetically. So whatever I'm doing magically, I'm always starting with my salt water and my incense so that I'm balanced, so that I'm creating wholeness, because I believe that that is a sacred place to start from. So sometimes I'm a traditional Wiccan, right? I do a full elaborate cast circle with all the bells and whistles. But sometimes I'm just doing a spell. Like my daughter is going to call me up and say, Mom, I need help with something. Can you do magic for me? And what am I going to do? Say, no, she's my daughter. So I'm going to do a spell on a Tuesday night, right? It's not like I got to get up for work in the morning. I don't have time to do a whole big elaborate ritual, and I'm just doing a little something for myself. So um, I have a little mini altar where I'm gonna, maybe I'm gonna dress a candle and, say a thing and do a chant and rattle a rattle, and I'm just gonna do something pretty simple, right? But before I do that, I will balance that in the elements every time.
Well, that's a good way of working it. I like that. I try to do that. I don't know that I'm always successful.
I keep it on my altar. I mean, the salt water, you can't just keep it on your altar because it evaporates.
Right.
But I mean, I keep the those four. It's easy to have four elements available. I remember, this is just a silly story, but years and years ago, I was at the Grand Canyon. This was before Isaac Bonowitz and I got married, so we were, I think, engaged at the time, but we were sort of touring all over the country and camping out of the back of our van. And it was just, the Grand Canyon was so beautiful and it was so sacred. And we were just so blown away by it. And the map of the Grand Canyon grounds had this non-denominational worship area. So we go there, and of course, there's this giant cross. All right, that wasn't what we had in mind. So kind of off to the left of that, though, is this beautiful, huge sort of rock that can be an altar. So we go into the back of the van and we just start digging around. We find a book of matches. We find a stick of incense. oh, look, there's salt in our food supplies, and we get, you know, like a Dixie cup or something, we put some water in it, we have 4 elements, we set up an altar.
Nice.
That's all you really need. Is once you have the 4 elements, you actually, that's the thing about the 4 elements, is that they represent the whole universe. So once you have 4 elements, you have everything.
And once you sit down and think about it, and I myself got a bunch of great ideas from your book, but it is easier to get your hands on all four quickly than you think it might be.
Yeah, in the back of our van. I
I
mean,
mean, yeah, they're more readily accessible than you might think. I think sometimes we have a tendency to make it more complicated than it really needs to be. I know I am guilty of that.
yep, I like complicated ritual, but I like simple also. I like, again, balance is sort of a theme.
Well, before we wrap up, I would love to ask you if you have any advice for beginners to the craft or somebody looking to grow their practice this year.
Oh, what a great question. Um, so I do recommend my book, Elements of Ritual. I can't help it. I do. It
As you
really,
should.
it really was the first book to walk you through the nitty-gritty details of um, how and why you're doing anything in the craft. You know, before that, it just seemed like people were telling you, well, this is witchcraft and this is what it is. And there are, you know, you call the quarters and you cast the circle and there are 8 holidays. And now let's read another book and it's the same content. And, you know, there's more, like, how you do that? Why do you do that? What does it mean? What if you did it differently? What would that mean? So I can toot my own horn on that one. But backing away from that one particular book, um, I want to say witchcraft is ancient. It can be very simple. It can be very complex. There are a million right ways to do it. It doesn't mean there's no wrong way to do it. You can screw it up. And what I would say is be attentive to learning and growing. Don't assume you know it all. Don't assume that any other teacher knows it all. Look at books, look at sources. When you pick up a book, flip to the back. Is there a bibliography? Are there references? Or is this person just making it up? The same when you know, listen to a podcast or look at a YouTube channel. Who is this person? Um, from what space, from what knowledge are they speaking? You know, because misinformation spreads really, really fast, as we know nowadays. And like, treasure your witchcraft and honor it, and honor it in part by assuming that what you do matters and the quality of what you do matters.
That is all very great advice. Things that I have said myself. I tell my listeners all the time, like, if there's no bibliography, I don't trust it. Whatever book it is, I don't trust it. It's got to have sources. And I always say I should not be the only podcast you're listening to. There's so much information out there and so many different ways that I don't particularly practice, that I've never studied. It's so important to learn from a variety of reputable sources.
Yeah, and also, I mean, have respect for your elders. And I listen, I started teaching witchcraft when I was in my early 20s. I'm not saying that young people don't know things. Young people know many, many things. And I learn from young people all the time. But if every single person you're learning from is in their early 20s, uh, where is the experience coming from? Where is the I burned myself on that stove and I'm not sticking my hand on it ever again coming from? Like, I could tell you stories because I have been places and I have seen things and I have done it wrong many times. And that is because I am 61 years old, so I've had time to do all that. So I'm not saying blow off young people. I'm not saying that at all. But I am saying also make sure to include paying attention to elders in the craft, to people who've been around a while, to books that might be older, that might be pre-internet. Like when I was revising The Way of Four, I had to remove references to cassette tapes and VHS and things like that. And unplugging your landline. I mean, things that we don't really worry about anymore. But don't discount like older material because our elders have definitely got things to teach us. And I'm not even talking about me. I know at 61 I'm an elder, but I also know that I have elders who I respect.
Great advice. I agree. Absolutely need to have some realm of experience in there. It's a good teacher.
Yeah, it matters. It matters.
Well, Deborah, thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to have everything linked over at witchwednesdays.com so you guys can find the book and everything and read all of, your 11 works. But thank you so much for sharing all about your book and all of your works. I appreciate your time and your expertise.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
That's everything that I have this week, listeners. I will see you next week.
Need even more? Subscribe to Patreon and YouTube for exclusive bonus content. Order a themed witchcraft box every month through Witch Wednesdays on Etsy. Be sure to follow on Instagram at Witch Wednesdays Podcast. Find all these links and more at witchwednesdays.com.